Welcome to Signs from Above. This is Lucy B, and today's story is about near-death experiences and meeting Jesus. So really, I had no intention of doing this story, but I have read a few things about this, and it does pique my interest a bit. Had a conversation with my mom today, and she ran into a sister of a man that my mom used to go to school with. So my mom asked her how he was doing, and she told her that he had just had a stroke. So she told her that her and the family, they went to go see him in the hospital, and I guess he was unconscious and ended up waking up when he was there. But he told his family that they could go home now and that he saw Jesus and was ready to go back. So it was just kind of amazing, and it really made me think of different occurrences about ones I've read, videos I've watched, books I've read, internet, and even personal experiences that I've encountered with people on that same subject. And so these occurrences actually happen more frequently than we realize. This was a TikTok video. This woman, she had been dying of this type of lung disease. She was really young. So she recorded her journey, and she recorded it just to get the word out on what this disease that she had, which was pretty rare. But after she ended up passing away, her family got her phone and found a shocking video that she made days before her death. So she was in the hospital and really could barely breathe. And in fact, as she was speaking, she was having a hard time catching her breath as she spoke. But however, weirdly, here she was dying, and this woman was glowing, and she closing her eyes, but smiling. Obviously, she was very tired. Her body was giving out on her. But what she stated is, she said, "He's real. Jesus is real. I've been with him. I'm not scared anymore." And this woman probably was in her 30s, maybe early, mid-30s, and died. And she had children that she was leaving behind. But the fact that, she didn't want to die, to where when Jesus was coming and speaking with her as she was dying, she wasn't scared anymore and was ready. Just kind of insane, just hearing that and seeing that, really, that shocking video. She's not here anymore. So there have been other instances, when a couple books that I've read, there was literally doctors who've had these experiences, and these people had everything to lose and nothing to gain by telling their experience. One particular person, you may have heard of her. Her name was Dr. Mary Neal. So she was an orthopedic surgeon, and she died in a kayak accident and drowned. And when she died, she felt her spirit just break away from her body. And she said she felt more alive than she ever had. And Jesus was with her during this entire time. She's one that just has to tell her story. Like, she can't keep quiet about it. And even though she may sound crazy to some people, like, she can't. She could put her whole career in jeopardy, right? But she doesn't care. What she cares about is what she saw, and that's where her home is. There was another man, his name was Dr. George Ritchie. So he is a psychiatrist, and he died in 1943 as a young Army recruit when he contracted pneumonia. So the hospital even put the sheet over his head and pronounced him dead. And during this time, he ended up meeting Jesus. Dr. George Ritchie, he ended up dying in 2007. And before he died, he stated, "Death is nothing more than a doorway, something you walk through." And throughout his life, he never changed his story. He wrote books about it. Again, a psychiatrist that had, that's somebody that they could say, "Oh, crazy. No, he went on to help people, and he had that at the forefront of his mind throughout his entire life. He spent his life talking about Jesus because of what had happened to him in 1943. There's another man named Lonnie, and he was dying of COVID. And Lonnie was in his 80s and pretty much had a 0% chance of survival as his organs were completely failing. What he said he saw a beautiful light and so badly wanted to go into it. He then thought of his wife and how he couldn't leave her. They had been married for years, probably 60 years. He couldn't leave her. And he was brought back, but knows he had faith already, but 100% knows about heaven, and everything that he's believed his whole life was in fact true. This is an aunt. She died when I was fairly young, but I'd heard it from family members that had talked about it. I have vague memories of her. So she is my great aunt. She did have terminal cancer. So when she was in the hospital, she talked about Jesus coming to see her, and she was comfortable and just ready to leave, in which she did a few days later. She was not a crazy woman by any means. It wasn't death talk and drugs talking. This woman was completely coherent and talked about Jesus. He came to see her, and she had a complete peace, about ready to go. If you haven't listened to my podcast on a terminal cancer, I think it's a four-part series. Oh, that was a crazy story, by the way, a total Jesus story. If you haven't heard it, I really ask that you do, because it still gets me when I think about it. So I had an atheist friend that I had been friends with for years. Complete atheist, no regard for Jesus whatsoever, no regard for any religion. It was her way, her life. She was living for herself. She ended up having terminal cancer, and she did just die just this past June. But in May, she surrendered her life to Jesus, and she stated that he was with her, comforting her. Remember, she was an atheist before this, and she had complete faith and told me Jesus was next to her. She wasn't on drugs. I mean, she was on some drugs, but we had normal conversation. It wasn't this crazy conversation. She was coherent. It was just profound. On a different note, which this was a little, you hear children talking. And so when my daughter, when she was about 3, she spoke about heaven to me and my husband. So she detailed everything about heaven. She said that she was with Jesus and didn't want to come to earth. She wanted to stay with him. She said that Jesus just showed her who her mommy and daddy would be. And so she finally agreed to go. She said that there were other kids there, and they lived in a big house with Jesus. And she said she didn't want to come. She didn't. But she just agreed because we would be her parents. Child's imagination, maybe. But she told it as if it was the realest thing in the world. And me and my husband just would listen to her. Now she's 9. She doesn't remember what she said then. But on a side note, me and my husband weren't supposed to have kids. In fact, the doctor said when I was pregnant, her first words were kind of like she didn't know what to say and said, I guess miracles do happen because my body was not supposed to have kids and there wasn't an explanation for it. I don't know. Maybe I'll do a story on that maybe next week about that whole crazy story as well. And that this little girl is meant to be here. Yeah, it was a complete miracle anyway. So anyways, what I'm getting at is that these things happen a lot, but many are quiet because they feel like they're crazy and don't want others to think they're crazy. And they don't want to take their experience that they had it to have others mock it when it was the most realest thing that they've ever been through their lives. So there are also near-death experiences on hell. So these, from what experts have said, believe that these are even more kept quiet because of the shame that they feel and probably just complete scared out of their pood mind. But I'll tell you now, the ones I have heard about have all just been completely scared straight. Like, they immediately changed their lives. And quite honestly, the thought would even scare me of ever even thought of having to spend any time in hell. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. So many of, people have never experienced anything like this. And that's okay. In fact, where my mind thinks of the people that haven't experienced and say, why do some people get to see this and I don't? For one, a lot of these people have quite a journey back to get their health back to where it was, and maybe sometimes they don't even get their life back to where it was prior to that. But for those that haven't experienced this, there is a verse in the Bible or a story in the Bible that you may know about. But the first thing that comes to my mind is Thomas, one of Jesus's apostle, or also known as Doubting Thomas. Oh boy, can you imagine what Doubting Thomas is thinking of what we call him? I mean, Doubting Lucy. That would be horrible if, thousands of years later that they're calling him that. So I can't imagine what he's thinking, like, oh dear. So after Jesus died, this is the story. So after he died, he came back to see the apostles, but Thomas wasn't there. So when he did come back and the apostles were telling him what had happened, he said he would never believe unless he saw himself. He wanted to see where the nails were and put his fingers where the nails were. So Jesus ended up coming back, and that's exactly what Nathan did. Is that he had to put his fingers where the nails were. And when he did, he ended up believing. So after that, Jesus said, you believe because you have seen. Great blessings belong to the people who believe without seeing. So that is in John 20:24 through 29. So remember, it wasn't even just a blessing. It was a great blessing to those who believe without experiencing or seeing these things. So I think that should give people comfort, for sure. So anyway, that is my story today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you back next week. Bye.